The harvest hooks were already tearing Gwendolyn Sare's oxygen garden from the seabed when she drove herself between the blades and the wounded sea dragon. Luminous algae streamed upward in shredded green ribbons. The dragon's gills opened once, twice, then shuddered wide. It exhaled black bubbles. They should have risen. Instead, the hollow beads hung beneath the royal pier, trembling around the dragon's mouth. Gwendolyn's blood went cold. Which garden did they strip? A harvester swung his curved blade toward another glowing bed. Gwendolyn cut his line with her belt knife. The blade jerked backward, missing the dragon's fin by inches. Above them, boots hammered across the pier planks. Bells rang from the palace landing, not for rescue but for commerce. The cosmetic crews had royal flags on their floats and palace wax on their crates. One of her rescue divers gripped her sleeve. The king approved the lease. Gwendolyn looked up through wavering water and saw him at the pier edge. Dragon King Thelric Vaen, 26, bronze-brown skin, a strong, clean-shaven face, intense blue-gray eyes, thick, dark chestnut hair tied back with a black coral clasp, deep navy sea coat, stitched with silver dragons. Devastatingly handsome. Devastatingly late. The wounded sea dragon rolled against a piling, pale lantern eyes dimming. Gwendolyn had one torn algae sample drifting away and one living creature losing breath beneath her hands. She chose the creature. Emergency vines, she signaled. Coil them under the gill line. Two divers hesitated, looking toward the royal rescue boat. "Look at me," Gwendolyn snapped. "Not the flags." They obeyed, dragging pearl green oxygen vines from the reserve basket and anchoring them around the dragon's resting hollow. Clear bubbles streamed from the vines, thin at first, then steadier. The dragon pulled one breath through them and stopped thrashing. Only then did Gwendolyn clamp a glass vial near its gills. The dissolved oxygen bead sank to the danger mark. She marked the depth on her slate. A shadow descended. Thelric had come down the pier ladder into the waist-deep inspection platform. Royal guards behind him and Marine Steward Albin Crow at his shoulder. Albin wore a pearl-buttoned steward's coat. "Biologist Sare, you are obstructing a lawful cosmetic harvest. This is a protected recovery garden." Gwendolyn surfaced beside the platform, water streaming from her black curls braided with mother-of-pearl beads. Her teal diving coat clung to her shoulders. The silver oxygen vial pendant flashed as she held up the reading. "Open seawater is not enough. The oxygen has collapsed." Albin glanced at the vial as if it were an inconvenience. "Incoming tide supplies the pier basin. Your gardens are sentimental overgrowth. His Majesty approved limited harvest after my measurements showed sufficient oxygen." Thelric's gaze moved from the black bubbles to her face. There was intelligence there, command and concern, too late. "You approved cutting an active recovery bed?" she asked him. "I approved a stewarded harvest," he said. Albin reported the resting dragons had moved on and the basin remained safe. "The dragon under your pier is gasping on the place he said was empty." A guard reached for her sample slate. Thelric raised one hand. "Do not take her instruments." It helped. She hated that it helped. Albin's mouth thinned. "The marine station is now under Pier Construction Authority. Biologist Sare's access is suspended until she stops interfering with Crown leases." For a heartbeat, the water seemed to fall silent. Her station, maps, nursery vats, and patient records for every injured sea dragon in the capital basin closed by a man who had never waited beside a gill through the night. Thelric frowned. "Suspended?" Albin unfolded a sealed order. "Necessary, Majesty. Evidence must be protected from emotional handling." Gwendolyn laughed once, low and bitter. "You cut the evidence from the seabed." The dragon convulsed beneath them. Another stream of black hollow bubbles escaped its jaws and did not rise. Gwendolyn pushed past the guard and dove again. She tucked reserve vines deeper under the dragon's wounded fin, then pressed her gloved palm against the creature's crest. "Slow," she whispered. "Take the vine breath." Its huge body settled, but the bubbles gathered thicker beneath the pier, clustering around the pilings like a warning the court could not sweep away. A torn algae fragment snagged on a harvest hook near Gwendolyn's knee. Its luminous vesicles pulsed faintly, the signature of a cultivated oxygen garden, not common kelp. She reached for it. A harvester yanked the hook away. Thelric saw the motion. So did Albin. "Secure that hook," Thelric ordered. "No," Albin said too quickly. "It is ordinary refuse." Gwendolyn rose between them, one hand still on the dragon's crest, the other pointing to the black bubbles that refused the surface. "Those bubbles mean deprivation," she said. "They tell us the garden is gone. They do not tell us who took it." Thelric looked down through the pure water at the suffocating creature his approval had failed to protect. Then the weakened sea dragon exhaled again, and the black hollow bubbles drifted under the royal pier, gathered in a dark cluster, and stayed there. The black bubbles did not move with the tide. They clung under the royal pier in a trembling roof, bead after bead, dark enough to turn the green water gray. Gwendolyn stayed beneath them, with one hand on the injured dragon's crest and the other on reserve oxygen vines, counting each breath until the convulsions slowed. Then another sound reached her through the water. A second sea dragon was gasping, not beneath the main pier, farther east, near the old piling field where rescue dragons rested after torn fins and net wounds. Its long body rolled sideways in the current, deep blue scales dulled to iron, gill slits opening too fast. A third shadow hovered beyond it. Gwendolyn's stomach tightened. The whole resting current is failing. Albancrow's divers pulled their harvest floats toward open water, as if distance could make the bubbles ordinary. "Stop those boats," Gwendolyn called as she surfaced. Albin's answer came clean and loud from the inspection platform. "No vessel is held without cause. The biologist is frightening the harbor over natural dragon breath." Gwendolyn climbed onto the lower rung, water pouring from her teal diving coat. "Natural breath rises." She pointed below. The black bubbles remained motionless, packed beneath the planks where every palace guest could see them if they looked down. Thelric Vaen looked down. "That was something. Hold the nearest harvest ship," he ordered. Albin's head snapped toward him. "Majesty, the cargo will spoil." "One ship," Thelric said, "until the oxygen readings are witnessed." It was not justice, it was not repair. But the hook crews stopped rowing and Gwendolyn used the space. She sent 2 rescue divers east with fresh oxygen vines and took the injured blue dragon herself. The creature fought the line at first, too weak to understand help. Gwendolyn swam close to its head with both hands open. No blade, no hook, only a coil of living vine glowing pale against her gloves. "Follow the current pocket," she murmured through the reed breath tube. "There, not up, across." Sea dragons did not obey human command. They accepted patterns that had saved them before. This one knew her scent and the pulse of cultivated oxygen vines. It allowed her to guide its wounded fin away from the depleted bed and into a narrow channel where incoming tides still carried breath. Clear bubbles rose from the vine coil. Not many. Enough. The dragon settled. On the pier, fishers, dock boys, and 2 palace maids watched from the rail. Gwendolyn wanted witnesses not polished by Albin's office. "Bring the glass column," she told Bryn, her youngest tight assistant. "And 3 vials, one from under the black bubbles, one from the current pocket, one from open seawater." Albin gave a thin laugh. A pier show. A breathing test. In the shallow inspection basin, Gwendolyn filled the first vial beneath the black bubble cluster. The silver bead inside sank past the red danger notch. She filled the second from the current pocket, where the moved dragon now rested. The bead hovered at the survival mark. The third, from open seawater beyond the pier, looked stronger, but not strong enough for an injured dragon's recovery bed. She set all three into the glass column so witnesses could see the difference. Open seawater keeps healthy fish alive, she said. It does not keep a wounded sea dragon breathing through the night. Recovery gardens create a resting pocket. A fisherwoman crossed herself. Then they cut the bed from under him. They cut something, Gwendolyn said. Now we prove what? She turned to the torn algae fragments she had rescued from the hook. Under her little lens, the luminous vesicles were shaped like paired lungs, deep and pearl-lined, grown to release slow breath through pressure change. Common kelp had flat surface bladders. It did not pulse when placed in low oxygen water. This fragment pulsed. Bren gasped. Garden strain. Albin stepped down into the basin with 2 guards. Or a salted mixture gathered from floating kelp and garden waste. Her own hands handled the sample while panicking underwater. One guard reached for the vials. Thelric moved first. He did not touch the glass. He placed himself between the guard and Gwendolyn's table, tall in his navy sea coat, jaw scar pale under wet bronze skin. No one seizes her samples. Gwendolyn's eyes flicked to his. Attraction was an insult, because he looked like rescue in the shape of the man whose approval had made rescue necessary. You may witness, she said. You may not hold. I understand. She hated how carefully he said it. Albin smiled as if patience belonged to him. Then witness this as well. My office will test whether her fragment contains ordinary kelp. Gwendolyn capped the fragment jar with wax, marked the time, and made Bryn and the fisherwoman mark it. Test it, but the vesicles pulsed before your office touched them. Below the platform, something metallic scraped stone. Gwendolyn looked down. A curved cosmetic harvest hook had lodged between 2 pier steps. In its inner tooth glowed a smear of pearl-green algae vesicles, brighter than the fragment in her jar. She lifted it from the water, careful not to touch the tooth. Stamped into the handle was the Royal Pier lease mark. Gwendolyn did not carry the hook to the marine station. She carried it in a glass tray held by Bren on one side and the fisherwoman witness on the other, while she walked with both hands visible. Albin Crow's guards reached the station first. By the time Gwendolyn crossed the wet pier stones, Red Harbor construction wax sealed the tide room door, the oxygen shelves, and the cabinet where seabed lease maps hung. A notice had been pinned over her duty board. Marine station closed under Royal Harbor Works Authority. Thelric stopped beside her, rainwater sliding from his dark chestnut hair to the white scar along his jaw. I did not order this closure. You approved the lease that made it useful, she said. He accepted the hit without flinching. What do you need opened? Albin stepped neatly between them. Majesty, she has already compromised the pier with panic. Lease maps, rescue logs, and health slates must be held from emotional tampering. Gwendolyn looked through the station window. The oxygen slates on the far wall had been taken down. The rescue board showed fresh chalk, too smooth, too empty. They are not preserving records, she said. They are replacing them. Thelric's blue-gray eyes sharpened. Then I opened the gate. No. She turned on him before his command could become her next problem. You may open gates, keep guards away from divers, require records brought into witness light, and hold ships in place. You may not touch samples, move dragons for display, command coastal crews over their captains, shorten oxygen tests, or ask me for trust before repair. The words felt harsh in her mouth because part of her wanted the strength in him to be clean. It was not clean yet. It was implicated. Thelric lowered his hand from the station's seal. Agreed. Albin gave a soft, polished laugh. A king, taking instructions from a suspended biologist. A king, hearing conditions from the woman whose patient is suffocating under his pier, Thelric said. Gwendolyn did not thank him. She gave him the first task. Open the diving gate, not the station. I want witnesses in the water before Albin's men move the rescue crews again. The lower pier gate groaned open under Thelric's key. Beyond it, the restricted channel led beneath the stone arches where old rescue boats moored. Half the slips were empty. Bryn's voice tightened. Morning roster had 6 boats. Now 2, Gwendolyn said. Albin's smile stayed fixed. Storm repairs required redeployment. A woman surfaced beside the barnacled ladder with a knife at her belt and a net scar across one cheek. She had cropped black hair, brown arms corded from salvage work, and the wary calm of someone who had survived more currents than officials. Redeployment is a clean word for sending us away. Gwendolyn's shoulders eased by one breath. Nira Voss. The coastal salvage captain climbed onto the rung but stayed half in the water, as if land belonged to people who lied better. Your boys told me you needed truth witnessed. Albin's face closed. Captain Voss lost a salvage contract last winter. Her resentment is known. Nira looked at Thelric. And your steward's divers cut protected gardens 2 nights ago under black lamps. I saw hooks go down at the South Recovery Bed and East Piling Hollow. I saw rescue boats ordered to the outer breakwater before the cutting started. Gwendolyn kept her voice steady. Did you see cargo leave? 3 low barges, covered, too heavy for common kelp and riding against the outgoing current. They went toward Palace Water, not Market Quay. Albin spread his hands. A disgruntled captain saw legal harvest barges. Then the lease maps will match legal beds, Gwendolyn said. Inside the station, a clerk hurried past the window with rolled slates under one arm. Thelric saw him. So did Gwendolyn. The king moved to the door, broke the harbor wax with his own signet, and then stepped back from the threshold. Observer's rules, he said. Biologist, she corrected. Biologist's rules. That small correction should not have touched her. It did. Gwendolyn entered first. The oxygen slates had been replaced with neat numbers, all taken at incoming current points. No readings from resting hollows, no low tide marks, no night checks. She marked the absence as carefully as a fact. Bryn opened the rescue ledger. They changed the boat times. Nira pointed at the dock column through the window. Not the tide stains. Outer breakwater boats could not have returned before second ebb. Gwendolyn placed the hook, the pulsing algae jar, and the oxygen vials beside the false slates. Now the system has a shape. Stripped gardens, moved rescue crews, clean incoming, water measurements, and royal leases hiding the beds. Thelric stood beyond the table, hands clasped behind his back, not touching. Say it plainly. Your approved lease is part of the damage, she said. Not the whole truth, but part. His jaw tightened. Then it will be named that way. Nira leaned closer over the map Albin had failed to remove. There is more. I followed the barges. Albin's polished calm cracked for the first time. Nira tapped the line where Palace Water met the private quay. Before dawn, the harvested algae was unloaded beside the Palace Cosmetic Works. Gwendolyn followed Nira's finger across the lease map until the line left legal harvest water and entered the private palace quay. Currents did not respect palace walls. She pinned strips of blue thread to the map. South Recovery Bed, East Piling Hollow outgoing tide, Back Eddy under the pier, Cosmetic Works channel. The path bent exactly where Nira said the barges had ridden too low against the natural pull of the harbor. Albin Crow watched from the doorway with 2 guards and a face scrubbed clean of alarm. thread is not evidence. No, Gwendolyn said. It is the route we test. She took a shallow skiff through palace water with Bryn at the oars, Nera swimming beside them, and Thelric standing at the stern with his hands locked behind his back. He had offered royal escort. She had accepted only his presence as witness and the order that no guard enter the water before her. Beneath the private quay, the current slowed into oily green light. Gwendolyn dipped a fine mesh sample net beside a mooring chain. It came up glittering with tiny fragments that pulsed faintly when she sealed them in low-oxygen water. "Garden vesicles," Bryn whispered. "From palace water," Nera said. Thelric looked toward the cream-colored building beyond the quay, where carved shutters were closed against rain. "The cosmetic works? Receives? Common kelp here? That is what Albin's permits say," Gwendolyn answered. "Common kelp does not breathe when suffocated." At the marine station, Albin had prepared his answer before she returned. A glass dish sat on her table, thick with chopped brown surface kelp mixed into the first algae sample. The pulsing vesicles were still there. Albin spread both palms. "As warned, mixed material. Careless collection." Bryn flushed. "I sealed that jar." Gwendolyn held up one hand before shame could turn him reckless. The jar was sealed after the vesicle pulse was witnessed. The hook tooth was photographed in wax imprint before the surface kelp appeared. The palace current fragments we just collected pulse the same way without brown kelp. She set the new vial beside the old one. "Contamination changes the sample's purity, not the earlier observations." Thelric's voice was quiet. "Who touched the table while we were at the quay?" Albin smiled. "Many people serve the crown. Then everyone will be named," Thelric said. Gwendolyn did not look at him too long. A listening king could become a dangerous hope if she mistook restraint for repair. She turned to the dragon health reports. The official sheets showed stable population. 32 resting sea dragons counted this week, no critical oxygen failures, only normal seasonal clustering. Each entry bore Albin's seal and tidy marks beside fin notches, gill scars, and crest colors. Gwendolyn knew patience, not numbers. She spread charcoal rubbings she had made from recovery tags and injury patterns. A torn left fin shaped like a crescent moon, twin scars under a black dragon's gill, a young green dragon with one silver whisker missing. "That is Marith," she said, touching the crescent fin record. "Listed here as healthy at the south bed, here as separate adult at East Hollow, and here as moved to open water." Bryn leaned in. "Same dragon counted 3 times." Because no one expected a biologist to recognize a fin tier better than a clerk recognized a number. Nera tapped another line. "This black male with twin gill scars is listed as 2 sightings. I saw him gasping under Pierstone this morning." Gwendolyn marked each duplicate in red shell ink. Stable population became 18 dragons, then 16, then 14. The room seemed to shrink around the truth. Thelric stared at the corrected count. "Where are the missing recovery dragons?" Gwendolyn wanted to answer with anger. Instead, she answered with the absence. "Not in their beds. Not in open water sightings. Not in rescue logs. If they could leave, they left weakened. If they could not, they sank where Albin stopped measuring." For the first time, Thelric looked less like a king than a man hearing breath leave a creature he had sworn to protect. "I approved the harvest because Albin promised cosmetic leases would pay for harbor repairs and rescue boats before storm season," he said. "After the tidal raids, I chose the fastest money that did not look like a tax." Gwendolyn folded the duplicate sheets into order. "You funded rescue by selling what rescue depends on." The words struck him cleanly. He did not defend himself. "Then I begin by stopping it." "No," she said. You begin by proving it where Albin cannot bury the stopped order as politics. Outside, the tide turned. Beneath the pier, black hollow bubbles trembled against the wood, thicker than before. One rose half an inch, failed, and sank back into the cluster. Gwendolyn went still. She had believed the stable population reports were wrong because sick dragons had been counted as healthy. Now she saw the deeper crime. The stable population does not exist, she said. It is the same weakened dragons counted again and again while the missing recovery dragons vanished from the stripped gardens. By noon, Albin Crow had learned to speak Thelric's approval like a weapon. Gwendolyn reached the marine station with the duplicate count sheets inside her waterproof satchel and found the lower doors chained from piling to piling. The harbor construction notice was gone. A new one hung in its place, bearing the king's old lease seal large enough for every fisher on the pier to read. Authorized harvest zone. Biological access. By steward permission only. Albin stood beneath it with a dry cloak and a patient smile. Your station interferes with palace ceremony clearance. The pier is not safe. The king approved the lease on my measurements. Unless you certify actual emergency conditions through this office, the sea blessing proceeds. Thelric came down the pier behind her, face hardening as he saw the seal. Crow. Albin bowed. Majesty, your authority must mean something. Either the lease was lawful or every coastal contract signed under your hand becomes doubt. Gwendolyn did not look at Thelric. She did not need to. The silence behind her was the cost. His name had become the lock on her own door. A clerk slid fresh oxygen slates through the station window. Neat numbers, safe numbers, no night checks, no resting hollows. Bren whispered, "Those were blank an hour ago." Gwendolyn felt anger spread through her ribs, hot as surface sun. Then she folded it small enough to use. If the station is closed, the tide is not. Albin's smile faded by one thread. She turned from the chained door. Nera, Fisher Sheds. Bren, take the duplicate, count rubbings. No one argues over the locked room. We build the record where his seals do not reach. The first shed smelled of tar, salt, and old nets. Fishers came because sea dragons had pulled their dead from storms for generations, and because black bubbles under a royal pier were not palace gossip when boats depended on living water. Gwendolyn spread a tide board across 2 barrels. Mark every dragon you saw resting this week. Fin wounds, gill scars, missing whiskers, time, tide. A boy no older than 14 pointed to the South Cove mark. Black male with twin gill scars. Saw him 3 mornings. The same one listed twice as healthy, Bren said. A fisher with rope-burned hands described hook scars near the East Hollow. Nera confirmed the cut angle. Gwendolyn scraped green residue from a broken hook and sealed it in a shell vial. The vesicles pulsed faintly when she lowered oxygen in the water. Garden strain again. At the tide pool below the shed, Gwendolyn tested current samples with silver beads. The incoming channel held barely enough for ordinary fish. The shaded hollow where a wounded dragon should rest dropped to danger before the bead touched bottom. She marked the depth on a barnacle stone because paper could be stolen. Thelric stood outside the shed threshold, not entering until she looked at him. Rain had darkened his navy coat. The white scar along his jaw seemed sharper. I can order the station opened. You can, she said, capping a vial. Then Albin says you opened it to save yourself. I deserve that. Deserving blame is not the same as repairing harm. The words made the shed quiet. He accepted them before the fishers. What repair begins here? Authority leaves the monopoly. Coastal captains control rescue placement. Local councils witness oxygen thresholds. Palace products do not get to buy silence from a seabed. He nodded once. Then we make that law after proof. After proof, she said. Not before. not as romance, not as apology. His eyes held hers, blue-gray and wounded by restraint. I know. She almost believed him. Then a rescue bell rang from the pier, and belief became useless again. Two divers carried in a torn slate from the old oxygen rack. They had found it wedged behind a bait chest after Albin's clerks swept the station. The writing had been scraped, but tide-depth grooves remained along the edge. Nara set it beside the new safe slate. Same date, different depth marks. Gwendolyn lined the grooves with her barnacle stone readings. The old slate showed danger at low tide. The replacement showed safety at incoming current. A cost, not a loss. The erased slate still remembered enough. Outside, Albin's messengers moved along the harbor, calling the evening sea blessing safe. Palace banners unfurled over the pier while black bubbles thickened beneath them. A fisher widow named Mare Lusk waited until the others had spoken. Her husband had once guided rescue dragons through reef fog. Now she kept the night lamps alone. She placed a small porcelain cream jar in Gwendolyn's palm. My niece scrubs floors at the palace works, Mare said. She took this from the rejected batch after the jars glowed in the dark. The cream inside looked pearl white at first. Then Gwendolyn tilted it into shadow. Tiny, luminous vesicles shimmered green through the cream, paired like breathing lungs. Bren stopped breathing. Gwendolyn opened her fragment vial beside the jar. The pulse matched. Mare's voice shook. Tell me they did not put the dragon's breath on royal faces. Gwendolyn closed her hand around the jar as the sea blessing horns began above the suffocating pier. They did, she said, and now we carry it where everyone can see. The sea blessing horns called people to the royal pier, while black bubbles gathered under its planks. Gwendolyn reached the outer steps with Mare's cream jar wrapped in wet cloth against her chest. Above her, palace lanterns glowed blue, silver ribbons hung from carved posts, and courtiers leaned over the rail to watch priests sprinkle salt water over the harbor. Below them, the sea looked bruised. It was not one dragon now. 3 injured sea dragons hovered beneath the pier, their nacreous scales dulled by shallow breath. A young green one lay too close to a piling, one silver whisker torn, gill slits fluttering open and shut. Each exhale released dark hollow bubbles that refused to rise. They collected in a trembling black ceiling under the ceremony platform. Albin Crow stood beside the blessing bowl, his voice carrying over the water. The dragons gathered to honor the crown's mercy. Biologist Sare has mistaken natural clustering for distress. Gwendolyn climbed onto the lower pier rail. Clear the edge. No one drops oil, salt, or lantern ash into that water. Nira, divers to the west current. Bren, emergency oxygen vines beneath the green juvenile first. Guards moved before the divers did. Remove her, Albin said. She is drawing sick dragons here to frighten the court. Thelric stepped between the guards and Gwendolyn, not touching her, not taking her place. His navy coat was soaked dark from the rain, jaw scar white in the lantern light. No one removes her. Albin turned, eyes bright with outrage. Majesty, this ceremony reassures the harbor. If she commands it, she owns the panic. The dragons own the emergency, Thelric said. He faced the rescue crews lined along the pier. Follow biologist Sare's signals until every dragon is breathing. For one breath, royal command finally carried her instructions instead of burying them. Gwendolyn did not waste it. She dropped into the water. Cold closed over her head. Sound became drumbeat. Pulse, muffled shouting, Nira, and 2 coastal divers followed with oxygen vine coils glowing pale green. Gwendolyn swam to the young dragon and opened both hands near its muzzle. No blade, no hook, only breath. The dragon tried to lift its head and failed. Its wide-finned wings dragged against stone. A hollow bubble slipped from its mouth. larger than the others, black glass trembling in front of Gwendolyn's face. Then the dragon collapsed against the piling. The impact shook the pier. People screamed above. The blessing bowl overturned. Silver water poured through the planks into the black bubble cluster. Gwendolyn caught the dragon's crest before its head struck stone again. Vines under the gills, not around the throat, leave the throat clear. Bren's hand shook, but he obeyed. Nera wedged an anchor pin into soft silt. The vines unfurled beneath the dragon's gill line and released a stream of clear pearl bubbles. For a terrible moment, the dragon did not take them. Gwendolyn pressed her forehead to the creature's scaled brow. Stay. Take the garden breath. Its gill slits opened. One clear bubble rose. Above, Albin sees the silence. You see? Her staged rescue disturbs the creatures. She should have left them to open seawater. Gwendolyn surfaced at the pier ladder, one hand still gripping the vine rope. Open seawater did not make that clear bubble. The emergency vine did. Albin pointed to Mare's wrapped jar in Bren's basket. And now she brings stolen palace property to smear a lawful trade. The guards moved toward the basket. Thelric moved faster, but stopped short of the evidence. He put his body in the narrow gap and raised both hands empty. No one touches her basket. Albin's face hardened. Then you side with the woman accusing your own palace. I side with breath, Thelric said, and I sighed too late. The words ran along the pier quieter than thunder. Gwendolyn saw the courtiers hear them. She saw fishers hear them. She saw Albin calculate the loss of that old shield. Cancel the blessing, she said. Thelric turned to the priests. The sea blessing is canceled. The pier is under emergency marine command. Rescue crews answer Gwendolyn Sare until the suffocation zone is cleared. This time, Albin's composure cracked fully. You cannot hand royal water to a suspended biologist. I can stop pretending she was suspended for anything but seeing what your office hid. Gwendolyn kept her eyes on the water. Divers, East Hollow next. Move the black female away from the pilings. No towing by fins. Current cradle only. The rescue went rough and slow. One dragon fought the vine. Another tucked a wounded fin and struck a ladder with its tail. The black bubbles thickened whenever a dragon panicked, and each cluster cost breath the creature did not have. Gwendolyn used every scrap of training. Palm signals, current angles, touch along the crest, pauses when fear made muscle rigid. Thelric repeated her commands to guards and crews without changing a word. By the time the third dragon settled into an emergency pocket, the ceremony platform had emptied except for witnesses, fishers, divers, and palace staff too shaken to leave. Albin was gone. Gwendolyn noticed the absence as Nera surfaced behind the platform steps. Gwen, behind the curtain blessing dais, half hidden beneath embroidered cloth, stood 6 palace cosmetic crates. Their lids had not been sealed quickly enough. Porcelain jars glowed through the gaps, pearl-white cream lit from within by tiny green-paired vesicles, breathing in the dark like stolen gardens. Maya made a broken sound. Gwendolyn lifted one jar into the lantern light, not opening it, not yet. Below the pier, hundreds of hollow black bubbles gathered motionless under Thelric's feet, while the palace creams glowed with the breath that should have risen from the sea. Gwendolyn kept the palace cream jar closed until every witness could see the water beneath it. Under the royal pier, black hollow bubbles trembled in place. The young green sea dragon breathed through emergency vines below Thelric's left boot. Older dragons hovered in current cradles beside the glowing jars behind the blessing dais. Gwendolyn climbed the platform. No jar leaves, no crate is sealed, no dragon is moved for display. The king stood one stair below her, empty-handed. Biologist Sare holds emergency marine command. Alban Crow reappeared with confidence of a man carrying paper against living breath. Majesty, this has gone far enough. The lease bears your approval. The products bear palace inspection. If a wrong exists, it began with royal permission and biologist Sare's unstable rescue spectacle. The damage was real enough to wound Thelric. Gwendolyn did not protect him from it. The king's approval opened the water, she said. Now the system will show who filled it. She set 3 proof vessels on the blessing table. 1 vial from beneath the black bubbles, 1 from an oxygen, vine pocket, and 1 from open seawater. The silver bead in the first lay at the danger notch. The second hovered at survival. The third held ordinary life, not recovery strength. Open seawater was not enough for injured dragons. The gardens made recovery pockets. Gwendolyn lifted Mare's cream jar beside the rescued hook. This hook was found on the Pier steps with cultivated oxygen vesicles in its tooth and a royal Pier lease mark on its handle. The cream glows with the same paired vesicles. Tiny green pairs pulsed like breathing lungs. Bren placed the hook imprint wax and first algae jar beside it. The pulse was witnessed before the jar was contaminated. Alban's office salted my first sample with surface kelp, Gwendolyn said. That happened after collection. The hook tooth, wax imprint, oxygen pulse, and palace, current fragments were recorded first. Nerava stepped from the ladder. I saw protected gardens cut at night from the south recovery bed and east piling hollow. Rescue boats were ordered to the outer breakwater before hooks went down. The barges rode low toward Palace Water before dawn. Alban snapped. A resentful captain inventing revenge. Nera pointed over the rail. Then asked the tide. Gwendolyn unrolled her current map. Blue shell lines followed the stripped beds to Palace Water. Beside it lay fresh fragments taken under the cosmetic works mooring chain. They pulsed in low oxygen without surface kelp. Current paths carried garden fragments to palace processing water, Gwendolyn said. Not market kelp beds. A fisher lifted the scraped oxygen slate, and the old low-tide grooves show danger. Bren set the replacement slate beside it. Alban's safe reading came from incoming current, not the resting hollow. Gwendolyn opened the dragon health sheets. The official report claims 32 stable resting dragons, but Mareth's crescent fin appears as 3 dragons. The black male with twin gill scars appears as 2. The young green below us is listed as healthy in open water while he is collapsing under this pier. A murmur broke across the witnesses. 14 confirmed dragons, she said. Not 32. Missing recovery dragons vanished from the gardens. Alban stopped measuring. Alban's face tightened. Counts are clerical imperfections. Then explain the crates, Mare said. Gwendolyn held up the palace invoice packet found under the cosmetic lids. Jar weights, batch dates, harvest timing, and ingredient mass labeled breath pearl extract matched the missing algae volume from 2 recovery gardens. A palace maid whispered, "Those jars were sent for royal dressing rooms." Thelric looked at the glowing cream, then at the bubbles trapped beneath his feet. Pain became decision. Alban tried one final turn. Majesty, your harbor repairs depended on those leases. Your rescue fleet depended on that revenue. Will you ruin coastal safety because a biologist dislikes commerce? Thelric stepped onto the platform but stopped below Gwendolyn's shoulder. He did not take the proof from her. He faced the fishers, divers, rescue crews, palace staff, and gasping dragons. I approved the lease, he said. I accepted Alban Crow's open seawater claim. My signature let protected habitat become harvest water. I will answer for that before every coast it endangered. Alban's mouth opened. Thelric did not let him use the pausa. Alban Crow, you are removed from seabed leases, dragon, health reports, rescue command, harbor construction reviews, and Coastal Compensation Authority pending public trial. All cosmetic harvest leases are void. The palace monopoly on breath pearl products is destroyed tonight. He turned to the rescue captains. Records, maps, invoices, harvest routes, and population counts are open to coastal witnesses. Recovery funding comes from the Crown Treasury and forfeited cosmetic profits. Every diver dismissed for refusing illegal cuts is paid and restored. Every community whose rescue waters were stripped is compensated. Albin barked a laugh. You cannot govern a harbor by apology. No, Thelric said. So I will govern this by surrender. He took the Sea Blessing Proclamation, turned it over, and wrote on the back while hollow bubbles quivered beneath the boards. No unilateral royal harvest of oxygen habitat. No cosmetic lease over recovery beds. Coastal councils hold future habitat authority. Rescue captains decide emergency placement with the chief biologist. Oxygen thresholds are public at every pier. Injured dragons cannot be moved for ceremony or count. He signed first. Then he set the pen beside Gwendolyn without touching her hand. Will you witness that I signed away the authority I misused? Gwendolyn looked at the dragon below, breathing because emergency vines held what the gardens should have given freely. I will witness the signature, she said, not forgiveness. I am not asking for it. She signed, Nera signed, Bryn signed, Mare signed with a trembling hand. 2 rescue captains, 3 fishers, and the palace maid signed after them. Albin was taken from the pier under guard, while no one knelt, no one cheered, and no one pretended the bubbles had risen. Only when the crates were sealed and the divers resumed work did Thelric step down below Gwendolyn again. The restored authority is yours if you accept it, he said. Gwendolyn looked beneath the royal pier, where black bubbles still hung like a debt the water refused to carry away. I will decide, she said, after a living garden gives them breath through a full tide. The first living garden went back under the royal pier at low tide. No banners hung above it. No blessing bowl waited on the planks. Coastal captains stood beside fishers, rescue divers, and 3 councilwomen with salt on their sleeves, reading every root weight aloud before Gwendolyn allowed the first oxygen vine to touch the seabed. Not there, she told the royal mason holding a stone anchor. That current shears east after second flood. Set it behind the old piling, where the wounded dragons can rest without fighting the tide. The mason looked once toward Thelric. The king stood waist deep in water with his hands open and empty. You heard biologist Sare. Gwendolyn kept working. For 6 days she had not let him mistake access for absolution. He had voided the cosmetic monopoly. Palace jars had been broken, and their glowing contents sealed for trial, not ceremony. Albin Crow's records were opened under coastal witness. Payments went first to divers dismissed for refusing cuts, then to fishers whose rescue waters had been stripped. The marine station no longer answered to a steward's locked door. Its front table held public oxygen slates, tide depth marks, dragon resting maps, and council seals. All of it mattered. None of it breathed yet. Nera Voss guided a basket of cultivated algae down from the skiff. Bryn checked the silver oxygen beads and called each reading to Mare Lusk, who wrote in a public ledger. The young green sea dragon waited beyond the pier shadow, weaker but alive. One silver whisker torn and gill slits fluttering as the tide turned. Garden one anchored, Nera said. Gwendolyn pressed the root mesh into the seabed with pearl gray gloves, feeling the faint, living pulse through her palms. Release flow. Clear bubbles streamed upward. They rose. A low sound moved through the divers, not triumph yet, only hunger for proof. The full tide cycle began. At first flood, the garden held. At high tide, the incoming current tried to flatten the vines against stone, but the anchor line stayed true. At slack water, the young dragon drifted closer, pale lantern eyes fixed on Gwendolyn's hands. She swam slowly, no blade, no hook, only a loop of oxygen vine glowing between her fingers. Across, she murmured through the reed tube. Not up. Across. The dragon followed. It settled above the garden with a wounded shudder that rolled through its long green body. For one terrible moment, no breath came. Then clear pearl bubbles left its gills and rose cleanly to the surface. No black beads gathered beneath the planks. Gwendolyn closed her eyes only after Bryn marked the reading and Mare witnessed it. One breath could be mercy. A full record could become law. Thelric remained near the lower rope, holding nothing unless she gave it to him. Rain silvered his dark chestnut hair and traced the white scar along his jaw. He looked tired in the way a man looked tired after surrendering the part of power that had once made him certain. When the ebb tide began, the garden still breathed. By moonrise, 3 injured dragons rested in separate pockets, each releasing clear bubbles that rose through silver water. Coastal children leaned over the safe rail and counted them until their mothers cried quietly behind their hands. Only then did Gwendolyn climb to the shallow steps. Thelric waited below her, one knee in the water, the final oxygen vine rope coiled across his palms. He did not offer it upward until she nodded. The council signed the second harbor order, he said. No construction within recovery water without their vote and your oxygen threshold. My threshold can outlive me. It should. His blue-gray eyes lifted to hers. I want your trust, Gwendolyn. I want the right to stand beside you when the tide changes. But wanting has no authority, and repair is not a price you owe me for paying. The quiet entered her more deeply than any plea could have. She looked at the water below the pier. No black hollow bubbles hung there now. The damage had not vanished. Missing dragons had not returned because a king had written better law. But the living garden was breathing, and he had waited for proof before asking for anything human. Tomorrow, she said, we plant the second bed. His hands tightened once around the rope, then stilled. Where do you want me? In the shallows, she said. Below my hand, you hold until I signal. If the current turns, you let go. A smile touched his mouth, fragile and disciplined. Dismissible labor. Coastal Council witness labor, she corrected. Dismissible by me. At dawn, Gwendolyn stood under the royal pier with clear bubbles rising around her shoulders. Thelric knelt in the shallows below her hand, holding the vine rope where she had placed him. She gave the signal. He let the rope slide exactly when she opened her fingers, and the new oxygen garden unfurled beneath the pier, breathing upward before any dragon had to gasp to be believed.